welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story talking about the changing dynamics in the South. Obviously, this is now Trump country. It has been Republican for a while now, but there's an influx of new populations, and there's some changes that are coming its way. It's a fascinating article. We're going to jump into that. We're also going to end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. What state in the South would you move to if you had a choice? Throw it down in the comment section. If you don't want to move anywhere in the South, you could also put that. But I consider the South basically Texas to Virginia, and it's a nice little curve on the way there. West Virginia also counts as the South. So the original South from the Confederacy days, if you want to put it that way. But throw which state you would want to move to down there. I'm sure I'll get a whole bunch of Floridas if people choose to respond to this one. Tell me what you think. With that said, let's jump into our article that comes from the Daily Wire. The rise of the South is not what you think. Why it holds the keys to political control. And this is one of their more deeper analysis pieces. They don't necessarily do these too often, though I'm sure that I have missed a whole bunch of them. Normally there are current events things, but this is more of a thinky piece. And I think we need to dive into this question because it is extremely, extremely important when understanding the demographic change in the United States after COVID, after the 2020 election, and how it's going to affect the future of politics here in America. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of how they got the information they got. It actually came from a third-party survey system or group that worked with Daily Wire for this one, and how it runs, how they did everything was, quote, "We aggregated a litany of demographic variables, survey responses, and trends such as education, income, gender, age, and partisan trends, and found it is not a monolithic voting bloc that is often portrayed as." This is talking about the South. Instead, the South is a dynamic and diverse region reflective of the national realignment where political trends are transcending state lines and challenging the conventional wisdom on how to win. And if you were to look at this actual map, I'll list off the states. You have Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland's even on here, which means Delaware is also on here, and Florida is on here. And that's all of what we consider the South. But within these different states, you have many different categories of cultural reflection is probably the way I would put it. The demographics, the way that they interact with politics, partisanship, all this sort of thing. There are very many different categories, and I'm actually going to read all of them to you because it's fascinating when you see them go across. I'll list also where they are. So Dixieland, you have a lot of that in Alabama. You have a lot of it in the panhandle of Florida, you have a lot in the lower part of South Carolina and Georgia, and you have a little bit in the lower half of Mississippi. Then you have sweet tea suburbs. So these are more of the urban areas. You're talking about your Louisvilles, your Lexingtons, your Bowling Greens, your Nashvilles, your Atlantas. You even have some in your North Carolina, Greenville, or other small places like Charlotte. And then you have your Republican resettlers. This is the people that are moving into these places. That is a lot of South and Middle Florida, some running up to Jacksonville, a little bit in the Panhandle there, and a little bit in South Georgia. You have your Fox South, which is almost all of the eastern part of Virginia, West Virginia, almost all of Maryland, and your a lot of area in North Carolina as well. And that would probably be the kind of South-ish demographics, but kind of leaning to more populous areas, that sort of thing. Then you have the Tex-Mex Nexus. This one is purple. It's along the border in a lot of places, in some of the, how we call it, the Panhandle, but basically the chimney of Texas. You also have some in Dallas, and then you have your Big Sky Country. Those are more of the plains in Arkansas, Oklahoma, northern Texas. You have your Big Mat Block, which is middle Texas, your Austin, your Houston, that sort of thing. Then you have the Soulful South, which is a lot of Louisiana and Mississippi, with a little bit in Tennessee, a little bit in Arkansas. You have your Trumpian Highlands, which is A lot of the north part of Alabama, Georgia, the top corner on that side towards Georgia of South Carolina, that top corner towards the side of Tennessee and Mississippi. You have Tennessee and Kentucky themselves. And then the last one is the Coastal Condo Coalition. You have a lot of those, and I say a lot, you actually have a little bit of those in your Floridas. So you can see here that this is actually 4, 8, 10 different categories subdivided between the 10 different states. Actually, sorry, more than 10 different states. That's 4, that's 8, and I'm looking at the map here, that's 12, 13, 14, 15. So out of 15 states, they're not directly divided by state because there are more categories. And the reason that this is important is because when asking about voting trends, when asking about partisan changes, and I know I just hit you with a whole bunch of different categories, but each of these categories consist of different populations, trends previously, the incoming populations, where they're coming from, what policies were in those locations, the cultural affinity that each population may have with another cultural, with another place within a state or a different region. And we have to drill down on these sort of things when truly understanding how this political alignment is going to actually change modern politics. So let's go into a description of Dixieland. Quote, even though Dixieland has been consistent and a growing part of the Republican coalition, the sweet tea suburbs, which make up sprawling metro areas like Atlanta, have moved Georgia from an electoral afterthought to a consistent battleground, making the possibility of unsettling embattled Democrat Senator John Ossoff a possibility. In Dixieland, from the understanding that they provide here, is a lot of low propensity voters, and that's what actually has been the shift for Donald Trump, bringing those, not only have they voted Republican for a while, but also bringing some of those low propensity voters out more during his presidential elections. You lose power during the midterms. This is something extremely crucial for Republicans to have to focus on, especially when it comes to their previous stalwart states in the South. And then you have places like those sweet tea suburbs that have actually changed the demographics enough that they are making some of these states more competitive. Quote, moreover, 6 out of 7 Democratic House pickups in 2024 came in predominantly suburban districts. The Democratic advantage in suburbs has allowed the Republicans' majority to remain slim, and this dynamic will be key to the 2026 midterms. On the surface, this looks like a normal suburb versus suburban versus rural divide with an accelerated concentration of party line voters. While it's true that we tabulate votes within state lines, the difference between winning and losing is always how the message resonates emotionally and getting voters to turn out. And that's why I'm going to pause here on the quote. That is why analyzing where your low propensity voters are, which regions are actually starting to have those more active college level voters who are going to probably be a little bit more Democratic, a little bit more liberal, having this sort of information and understanding the shifting dynamics within these states is ever, ever important. It always is, but I just love to draw attention to this, especially with Trump basically lambasting his party's own chances if he keeps going down the path he's going on. At least that's what I would argue, because the people who are just the normie interactors with politics look at the economy and they say, the president messed up here. They blame Joe Biden for the economy. They blame Joe Biden for a lot of other issues. They're going to do the exact same thing with Trump. And as we've discussed before, this path is probably not the most economically stable one. It could be prosperous long term, but it's not the most short-term economically stable position, which will freak out some people. So I'll continue from the quote, which I was talking about. Quote, while it's true that we tabulate votes within state line, the difference between winning and losing is always how the message resonates emotionally in getting voters to turn out. Just as the issues that matter most are voters transcend state lines, so must the message, end quote. And this is a very important insight from our friends who are writing this article. And I'm not trying to imply that they're 100% right that the South will be even more in play during the the next midterm. I think that they have a point. I don't know how accurate it will be. Are they actually going to be able to use the power of the sweet tea suburb Democrats in order to win at some of these? Yes, I think it's possible, especially because, as I mentioned, they are very well educated, which means they are very engaged voters, meaning they will probably come out. They can actually afford to take a day off of work in order to go vote on these days. And I know that's a really simple, basic argument. It's not necessarily true in all cases, but my point being that these are use cases that are always used to actually explain why this population is more engaged. Their college education, their possible ability to not work on certain days. And while I think it's not 100% true, it is not something that you can explain away in a general fashion. I do believe that these characteristics are more likely to be found in this segment of the population. So, but with that said, if you want to read more of that article, the link will be in the description below. Like and subscribe button. You can go see the breakdown a little bit more. You can see the actual map that I was referencing with the 15 different states and the 12 different regions. But with that, let's jump into our Daily Delight. This one comes from our friends at the Daily Bunny by Daily Bunny. And it's a cute, adorable photo of a bunny jumping on the bed right after the parent made it. It's like, no, this is mine now. And it comes with a cute little caption. It reads, as soon as the bed was made, Abby has to jump up and stretch herself across it. Human, this is my bed. And though I don't necessarily I say not enjoy, it does bring a smile to my face to see those sort of things. The human comments kind of make me cringe, but I think that's fine. A little bit of cringe with a little bit of a smile is going to go a long way. So if you want to also read that, leave this episode with a smile, you can go check out the other link in the description to the Daily Delight, and that will take you directly to it. Also down there, you can find the links to this podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at your DailyFlip, where I post the links directly to the YouTube videos that come out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday are our international news segments. It's 6 and 6. So it's 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday are the national-based ones where we focus on U.S. politics. So with all that said, there is only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.